Two questions need to be asked when considering breach of duty. First is the question of law. What was the appropriate standard of care? How the defendant ought to have behaved in the circumstances. Second question is of fact. Did the defendant reach that standard? In the first question regarding the standard of care, it should be noted that the standard of care is that of a reasonable man, which is constructed objectively. In Nettleship case, the standard of care owed by a learner driver is the same objective standard owed by every ordinary driver. However, in the case of children, the test is what degree of care and foresight can reasonably be expected of a child's defendant's age. In Mullin versus Richards, Law Justice Hutchinson stated that the standard is objective, but the question is where an ordinarily prudent and reasonable 15-year-old schoolgirl in defendant's situation would have realized as much. On the evidence, the risk would have not been obvious to the defendant, so she did not fall below the standard of care required. The extent to which defendant can be responsible for actions influenced by his physical illness depend on the extent of his awareness and whether action can be controlled. In Manfields versus Weetabix, the defendant would have been at fault had he known of his condition of hypoglycemic state and kept driving. Defendant did not fall below the standard of required because he did not know of his illness. If defendant is performing skilled tasks, the standard required is that of a reasonable person of defendant's profession. In Bolam, claimant suffered fractures on the pelvis while undergoing electroconvulsive therapy. Bone fracture was unknown but of slight risk. Claimant claimed defendant, the doctor, was negligent in that he did not use a muscle relaxant. Here, the defendant could adduce expert evidence to support the method he used, so it did not fall below the standard of care required. In Bolitho, it was decided that in applying the Bolam test, the court must be satisfied that the basis of the body of medical opinion relied upon is logical. Thus, in a rare case where the medical evidence was incapable of withstanding logical analysis, the judge is entitled to hold that it could not provide benchmark against the doctor's conduct felt to be assessed. Bolitho was a response to the concerns that the court were overly relying on professionals to decide cases that the court should not have jurisdiction to intervene. Regarding games and horseplay, Blake versus Galloway was the case to be cited. Defendant and claimant were part of a group of children playing a game involving throwing twigs at one another. Claimant suffered serious injuries in the eye. It was held that the participants of the game impliedly consented to the risk, so here there is no breach of duty.